Valentine's Day, a night of love, laughter, and for some, loneliness. Anna sat alone, her apartment dimly lit by the cold glow of her phone. Outside, rain whispered against the windows, the wind pressing like unseen hands against the glass. She scrolled past picture-perfect couples, forced smiles, overpriced dinners. Then, her phone buzzed. A single message. "Happy Valentine's, my love. I'm waiting." Her breath hitched. The name beneath it sent a chill through her veins. Daniel. A name she hadn't seen in a year. A name that didn't belong in the world of the living. Because Daniel was dead, buried, gone. The phone slipped from her fingers. The apartment seemed smaller, darker. And then, another buzz. "Open the door." It was just a prank. Anna tried to convince herself, the words repeating in her mind. After all, how could it be real? Daniel had died a year ago, gone in a way that left nothing but empty rooms and hollow memories. Her fingers trembled as she locked her phone and tried to shake off the feeling creeping over her. But the next message made her freeze. "I see you. Open the door." Her blood ran cold. No, it was impossible. The door was locked. She was alone. Her apartment was small, too small for anyone to hide. There had to be a logical explanation. She reached for her phone again, but before she could check the message, the room darkened. The light flickered overhead, twice, 3 times. Then, with a final pop, the power went out completely. The phone in her hand illuminated her face with a pale, sickly light. It seemed to pulse with a life of its own. Then, the silence was broken. A soft scratching sound, rhythmic and methodical, came from her closet. It wasn't the wind. She knew that sound. It was too deliberate, too close. Anna stood frozen in place, her heart hammering in her chest. Her fingers slowly pressed against the cold, smooth surface of her phone, opening the message again, desperate to find some answer, some reason for the madness. But the screen stayed blank. The scratching grew louder, faster. She backed away, her body trembling. But the closet door didn't open. Not yet. She turned her head to the window, hoping the storm outside could drown out the noise, the fear. But there was nothing but darkness outside. No streetlights, no cars passing by. Just the howling wind and the relentless scratching, now accompanied by a low, guttural sound, almost like someone, was dragging themselves across the floor. Closer, closer. She reached for the light switch. Nothing. Not a flicker, not a glimmer. The apartment was submerged in darkness, save for the faint, unblinking glow of her phone. Her pulse raced. The scratching stopped. And then, nothing. Just silence. One knock, sharp, deliberate. Then another. And then, nothing. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Anna's breath hitched, her pulse a deafening roar in her ears. She didn't move at first, didn't blink. Every muscle in her body screamed for her to stay put, to ignore it, to pretend she hadn't heard anything at all. But her feet betrayed her, inching toward the door as if something unseen was pulling her forward. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the peephole, peering through it with slow, deliberate hesitation. The hallway outside was empty. No shadows, no shifting figures, no breath on the other side of the door. Just the dim glow of the flickering hallway light, swaying as if disturbed by something she couldn't see. Her stomach twisted. The apartment was locked. No one had come in. And yet, something was wrong. She turned back toward the room, and that's when she saw it. The kitchen counter was empty just moments ago, but now, sitting there in perfect, silent stillness, was a black box. Anna's chest tightened. She hadn't put it there. No one had. No sound of footsteps, no rustling of movement. Just there, waiting. Her fingers twitched at her sides, but she didn't want to touch it, didn't want to go near it. But something gnawed at her insides, a deep, instinctual dread creeping beneath her skin. Step by step, she approached. The lid wasn't taped shut. It wasn't sealed, just closed. A breath, a hesitation. Then, with a single shaking hand, she lifted the top. The smell hit her first. Rot, decay, something far beyond spoiled, something foul. And then her eyes registered what lay inside, a heart-shaped cake. Or at least, it had been. The frosting was cracked and peeling, the deep red colour now a sickly brown. Maggots wriggled through the layers, tiny white bodies twisting, burrowing into the rotted sponge. The surface pulsed, as if alive, as if breathing. Her stomach lurched. But it wasn't just the cake. There was a note, folded, placed carefully on top, untouched by decay. Her fingers trembled as she picked it up, unfolding the paper with slow, deliberate movements. The handwriting was unmistakable. She had seen it before, written in birthday cards, in love notes, on scraps of paper left on her mirror. But this wasn't a love note. Eat it, my love, so we can be together again. Daniel. Anna gasped, the paper slipping from her fingers, floating to the floor like a dead leaf. Her stomach clenched, her breath ragged. She stumbled backward, her spine pressing against the wall. No, this wasn't real. It couldn't be. Her head shook, trying to clear the impossible from her mind. The cake, the note, the box that had appeared from nowhere. It had to be a nightmare, some twisted trick. And then she heard it. A whisper, software right by her ear. He's already inside. Her body locked in place. Her eyes darted around the darkened room, the shadows stretching longer than they should. Her own breath sounded deafening in the silence. The walls felt closer, the air heavier. Something shifted in the reflection of the kitchen window. A shape, a figure, standing just behind her, not outside, not at the door, inside. The air thickened, pressing against Anna's skin like something alive. The silence wasn't empty. It carried weight, heavy and watching. She stood frozen for half a second, heart hammering in her chest, then fumbled blindly for her phone. Her fingers were clumsy, shaking as she swiped at the screen, desperate for light. The flashlight flickered on, a weak beam slicing through the darkness. And there he was, standing at the edge of her bed, still, silent, waiting. Daniel. But this wasn't the Daniel she remembered. This wasn't the boy who had once whispered love into her ear, who had held her hand under the stars. This was something else, something wrong. His face was torn, patches of skin hanging in ragged strips. His eyes, black, hollow, stared through her, empty sockets that saw too much. And his mouth, his lips had been crudely stitched shut, thick, blackened thread twisting through decaying flesh. The stitches bulged as if something inside was trying to push free, trying to speak, trying to... Anna screamed. Her body moved before her mind could catch up, legs burning as she lunged for the door. Her fingers curled around the handle, yanking, pulling, twisting, locked. No, jammed, stuck. The cold metal wouldn't budge. She banged against it, fist slamming into wood, her voice breaking as she screamed for help. But there was no one, no neighbors, no outside world, only the dark. A slow, wet sound filled the silence. A drip, then another, then a steady, slow trickle. Anna turned her head, breath catching in her throat. The walls, they were bleeding. Thick, black-red liquid oozed from the ceiling, crawling down the walls in slow, sticky streams. It seeped through the cracks, forming words, sentences, voices. Her phone buzzed violently in her hand. the screen flooded with notifications. You left me alone. You never said goodbye. I brought you a gift. The messages multiplied, one after another, faster and faster, the same words over and over until the screen glowed red, the text drowning in static. The phone burned in her grip. She dropped it. The screen cracked. The buzzing stopped. A hand, ice-cold, rotten, wrapped around her wrist. Anna gasped, her body locking in place as fingers tightened around her skin, the grip unrelenting. She turned, every nerve screaming for her to stop, to run, to do anything but look. But she did. She looked. Daniel's stitches had snapped. The black thread dangled in loose, curling strands. His jaw hung open, wide, too wide, impossibly wide, and inside, teeth, rows of them, sharp, glistening with something thick and dark. "Kiss me, Anna." His voice was wrong, twisted, layered with something that wasn't human. "Be mine, forever." Darkness, empty. Then, a gasp, sharp, desperate. Anna's eyes flew open. Morning lights poured through the curtains. The room was clean. No blood, no messages, no Daniel. Just the familiar stillness of her apartment. Her sheets were smooth, her hands unshaken. A dream. It had to be. A nightmare, nothing more. She exhaled, pressing a hand to her forehead. Relief settled in her chest, thin but real. Then, her phone buzzed, her stomach twisted. Slowly, she reached for it. The screen lit up with a new message. "Last night was amazing. I'll see you again soon." Her breath caught. Number no, it wasn't real. It wasn't. Then she saw it. The mirror. Her reflection. And standing behind her, Daniel, grinning, rotting. She tried to scream, but no sound came. No breath, no words. Her lips wouldn't part, because they were stitched shut. Anna's scream never left her throat. The stitches held tight. Her hands clawed at her mouth, fingers trembling, breath hitching. In the mirror, Daniel only smiled, waiting, watching, and then, darkness. The screen fades to black. Love never dies, but some loves should stay buried. If you enjoyed this terrifying tale, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who loves a good scare, and hit that subscribe button. But be warned, turn on notifications at your own risk, because the next story might just be waiting for you in the dark.